Good evening to you. Welcome to NewsMakerlive right here on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Olio. I made a promise to you earlier on today that Prime Minister Alan Chastanet, who is also the Minister with responsibility for finance, economic growth, job creation and the public service, would be on the program this evening, and that is to conclude the season for 2019. He is indeed on the program, and we'd like to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for your presence here on this evening's NewsMaker Live program. The number of issues that we need to address, and I'm sure that the people would have their own questions that we want to pose to you a little bit later during the course of our program. Once again, this is the final NewsMaker Live broadcast for 2019. As far as you're concerned, Mr. Prime Minister, what would be the number one issue that you believe should be topping the list of concerns for St. Lucians right now? What do you think we should be discussing, or how should we start?
That's really very, very difficult because there are multiple issues, and some of them are interrelated. To confine oneself to one critical issue would really be doing a disservice to the public of St. Lucia.
But for me, it's crime. To me, crime is the number one concern right now, with some 41 murders and 4 police killings.
Okay, but I mean, I can equally say the state of schools and education system. I can equally say what's going on in healthcare. I can equally say in terms of job opportunities. I mean, even though that we've lowered the unemployment rate to 17%, it's still 17% unemployment. And although we've lowered it from 44% youth unemployment to 34%, it's still 34% youth unemployment. And so these are still very significant numbers that have to be addressed. So it would always be from the perspective that you're going to take it. I guess maybe I see it a little bit differently in that when I won the election, and within the first 48 hours of getting an update on where we were, I came out and I said, wow, security is in a lot worse condition than I thought it would be, and is going to require substantially more of attention. Sadly, security is not just about the police. It's about the judicial system. It's about the investigations. It's about the capacity to be able to put a case together. It's the DPP's office. And then it's about the root cause of crime in its first place. So we have done a tremendous amount of work in beginning to address a lot of these different things. So whether it's the CCT cameras, of which 180 are already operational, and we've signed off on another 350 to go around the island, whether it's the success and the work that we've been doing on the forensic lab, whether it's the new communication systems that we've put in the police force, and the new equipment that we're putting into the police force, the training that we've been adding, whether it is now trying to improve the judicial system. Although we had a major setback, we do have the criminal court, the temporary one, improved. We have a magistrate court, and we have the family court, which we already had before. But we were hopeful that we would have started the new police headquarters already, and part of that is 6 new courts. The DPP's office has been busy at work. We have added some additional social workers. I'm very excited about the sports programs we're putting in place. So we are targeting it in all different levels. In terms of the murders is one thing, but in addition to the murders has been that the total number of aggressive acts, and we measure them, I think there's about 10 different categories that we have: car theft, burglary, robberies, armed robberies. All those things are measured. We are not at the number we wanted to, which was to reduce it by 10%. We're about halfway there, but we are starting to see an impact. We've brought on additional police force. I think people can see that the traffic department is out, and more importantly, what I'm very encouraged by, Tim, has been the fact that we are seeing crimes being committed, and we're seeing very quick results. Not on all cases, but we've seen a substantial improvement in the policeman's ability, the police officer's ability to be able to put together a strategy. The forensic lab is paying dividends. I'm very excited. Now we have fingerprinting. By hopefully before the first quarter of next year, we will have the DNA lab set up. all these things are going to really substantially help us improve on the overall crime rate. So,
but as far as the St. Lucian public is concerned, people are watching this broadcast right now, all this will amount to nothing if they do not feel safe. And St. Lucians naturally do not feel safe right now, particularly small business enterprises. Why has the government not been able to successfully address the crime problem from the perspective of ensuring that people feel a lot safer? People do not feel safe. That's the reality.
Well, let me say this to you. It's difficult for people to have a sense of what I'm saying because I know what we're doing. So when I came in, that there was nothing that was being done. Okay, so you cannot tell me that the forensic lab remained shut. You cannot tell me that a policeman attempting to communicate with another policeman was doing so using his own cell phone. You can't tell me that the investigation abilities were bad, that there was insufficient cars. You can't tell me that there was no maritime boats working. You can't tell me that there was no DPP. Okay? So the fundamentals to address the crime situation in St. Lucia, there was nothing there. So if in fact that continued, crime would continue to have gone worse and there would have been no ability to resolve it. Where my confidence comes from is the fact that we are putting resources in. And I know that when you start doing the right things, when you start making it a priority, so the training, the communication systems, I mean, you're talking about huge improvement where in vehicles and policemen walking around that they have a walkie-talkie that they don't have to be able to go through it. It's their own channel, right? When you start talking about the CCT cameras, we've seen a huge improvement in terms of car accidents. We really want to now be able to start using that information on a more intelligent basis. The fingerprinting. So we had 6,000 fingerprints which were never processed. So it means that there was no ability in the system to be able to capture somebody. It was, you know, they say it's like a squirrel, a blind squirrel is going to find a nut every now and then. That's what we were like. So my confidence in why I'm saying to the public of St. Lucia to continue to hope, continue to believe, because we are doing the work. And I'm starting to see the signs of progress. You talk about a police force that was demoralized between the impacts report and the neglect, right? When we came in and I saw it, and I was so grateful to my wife, you know, and I want to congratulate her again on the incredible event that she just did to, one, raise awareness of policemen, where we recognized policemen officers that have retired, and to recognize successful police officers and the funds we're raising and the programs that she's been doing to be able to bring some immediate relief. I mean, there was a police station, I won't say which one it is, that called up because there was no hot water. And because of the resources, she was able to, within 4 hours, get a new solar heater put in, and that same night those police officers were having hot water. We may, as average citizens, not think that that's important. Okay? But how can you be asking these men and women to go out and risk their lives when their basic needs? I went to a fire officer's office. He was using books to sit on. That's how bad it was.
And
right?
This is what your government inherited.
Yes.
But the fact remains that you did promise, as leader of the United Workers' Party, contesting the last general election, that you would make things better.
Correct.
What if the voters were to be given the opportunity to decide your fate tomorrow, during the elections, and they decided to vote a government out of office? You think that would be fair, based on what you promised, as far as crime is concerned, and what you have delivered?
I think it would be unfair, because I think that my government has continued to provide transparency and to be able to provide information of what we're doing. And I think that if you even spoke to the individual police officers, while they're not going to tell you, boy, this is great, there has been substantial improvement. And even the fact that we are having crime that's taking place, that we're capturing people, we're arresting people, we're charging people, we still got the justice system. Right? And so this is not about picking on the justice system, but there's something wrong when an individual who is already on remand, yeah, gets caught with an illegal firearm and is given bond again and is allowed to go out. How does that happen? So how do you feel as a police officer? And these are some of the problems that we've got to be able to resolve.
But as a legislator, what are you willing to do about this?
I'm willing to do everything that it takes.
How soon?
We have been doing it.
In terms of legislating laws.
But we have legislated.
For example, gun crimes would result in somebody not receiving bail.
No, that is the judgment of the judges or the magistrates. Are we working with the magistrates? Yes. Okay? And so there's I said, no one thing by itself is going to solve this problem. I'm upbeat. I'm excited because I know what we're doing. I know that we're finding resources where people thought we couldn't find resources. And that's what's incredible. When you think of what we're doing in the police force, what we're doing on roads and infrastructure, what we're doing in the school systems, what we're doing around the country, and meanwhile, we're not putting the country into debt, right? That we're able to make payroll. And so that's been the balancing act as well, is not only to be able to, I've never come to say we don't have enough resources. We are continuously pushing the envelope to find ways to be able to solve the problem. Look at a big issue. We have been able, for the first time of any government, to settle wage agreements 3 years in advance. Do you know what the significance of that is? Is that you have civil servants and you have police officers and everybody out there that already know what their pay increase is going to be, and when they go to the banks are going to recognize that. And it creates a level of stability, and it's an amount of respect, rather than continuously doing these things in reverse.
But somebody will tell you that the fact that the salary is guaranteed does not amount to much. If, for example, they cannot safeguard themselves, their lives, and also their property. And again, going back to how the government should be assessed and if a general election would have been called tomorrow. In most Latin American countries, general elections are called every 4 years. So then, come next year, your government would be scrutinized not only for its performance as far as the economy is concerned, but as far as crime is concerned. Come next year, do you believe that the time will really run out, if it has not happened already, for the government as far as giving what seems to be plausible reasons as to why it has not successfully tackled the crime problem?
But see, that's where I disagree. See, that we are tackling the crime problem. You're seeing more visibility. There's a greater effort. I was very fortunate to meet an acting superintendent, and he knows who he is, and his team. I was blown away. 18 years on the force, the level of enthusiasm I saw in him, the level of dedication, and some of the crimes that had been taking place, he was ready finding solutions to them. We want where our police officers can spend the time doing their job, not having to worry whether the lights work, whether there's water, whether the car is going to start. So I can only say to you that I am very confident that we're seeing that the efforts that we're making are producing results. Is it exactly what everybody wants? No. So I accept that. But I know that there will be a very time, hopefully soon, that we're going to see ourselves turning a corner. And how can I be confident? Because the effort is there. I'm not, we're not BSing anybody. I can show you the CCTV cameras. I can show you the new cars. I can show you the communication systems. I can show you that the forensic lab is open. I can show you the work that we're doing in the court system. I can show you the resources we're making. I can show you the coordination that's taking place on everybody. It will start paying dividends. And I'm already seeing...
Is that a guarantee that you're giving the Indonesian public so that God spare our lives, December of 2020, we're not discussing the same issue along the same lines?
There's only one person that can guarantee anything, and that's the Lord. I know in life that when you put effort in, genuinely it produces results. Can I say to you absolutely when the timing is going to be? I don't know. That's why when people said to me, when are you going to see the results? I said, it takes about 3 years of trying to change policy before you're going to see any effective change. I see it when I do events. It's always the third year in which people then get a better idea of where we're going. That's just reality. There are certain things that take time. You have to first win people over in the police force. So think of how many people you meet a corporal, 23 years on the police force, a $3,000 salary, no life insurance, no health insurance. Okay, Doesn't seem like anybody cares, and all he reads on the newspapers is how bad the policemen are. Okay?
Talking about that, how
But I'm just saying, so we came in. When did we have the first policeman and fireman's ball? December of 2016. Why? Recognize that there was a significant problem that has to be attacked multitude levels. First of all, these people, these officers are our heroes. And we spend too much time as a society degrading them and not appreciating what they're doing.
How satisfied are you with the performance of our police officers? I know that your police officers are in the studio right now, and maybe that probably might deter you a little bit. But honestly, how satisfied are you with the performance of our police officers?
I'm relatively satisfied, okay? But I also understand where they're coming from. And there are things that they want to see done in order to be able to get the full effort. But that's why I made the point that I met this acting superintendent, blown away. I said, okay, things are now starting to happen. And I think that when police officers start recognizing that they're being given the equipment, that we have a proper tactical team, that we have the ability to be able to collect the evidence, and they start gaining confidence in the DPP's ability to prosecute and the ability that the court system is going to work. So how do you think they feel that arrest somebody, get the evidence, it takes forever because we didn't have a forensic lab? So here's how it goes. We want to be able to send all this evidence to a particular place in the States. So they say, no problem, you can send it, but you didn't pay your last bill. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that you send the money up front. So they go through the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance says, well, that's not in the budget and you've already spent the money. Okay? So there's so many obstacles in the system, Tim, that people get so frustrated. I have to resolve all of them. I am committed. I am more determined than I've ever been before. I am not deterred, nor is my government, in resolving these issues.
How soon are you going to be resolving impacts?
Oof. Unfortunately, impacts is not one of those things that's within my control. All I can do as the Prime Minister is to make sure that when the DPP's office calls me, that they need monies to do processing or anything else, that's my part. That's the role I play. So the DPP's office is the one driving this process. And that was part of the problem. That's who the courts recognize. See, the DPP is constitutionally protected. So when the Jamaicans, as an example, did the investigation, none of the work that they did is of any use for us. None of that was processed through the DPP's office. So it means that we had to go back, the DPP had to go back and take all the physical evidence, of which we've only gotten half back, in order to be able to do the analysis. And then he and his team must make the determination as to whether they should prosecute or not prosecute. That's solely the right of the DPP.
Is it possible that your tenure in office will end and you'll not be able to resolve this particular matter with the Americans? That is, the alleged extrajudicial killings by the police.
What do you call resolve? Do you call resolve meaning that we're off the Leahy law? Do you mean resolve that we have an understanding with the Americans, that we're moving in the right direction and we're working together? What is your interpretation of resolve?
I'm talking about to the extent that the Americans will provide training to the officers and provide financial and other support to the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. So, because it all depends. Doesn't it all depend on the United States and how they feel with regard to how the government has handled this particular issue?
It does. The U.S. government has a law called the Leahy Law, which that once it's imposed, very difficult to get off, and it requires prosecution. Prosecution doesn't mean conviction. Okay, prosecution means that the case has been tried, or that the DPP office has to say we're not able to trial this case. Right? But that has not prevented us from working with the U.S. So we're creating a border control system in which the Marine Police now are going to be in the border control. Because they're out of the police, we're now going to be getting assistance with your your Coast Guard and your Marine Police Station. Whereas we're prohibited from working with the U.S. government at a national level, we're not prohibited from working with them at a state level. Similarly, we have no prohibitions on us when we're working with the Canadians, working with the British, working with the Taiwanese, working with the Israelis. There is the Leahy law doesn't apply to those. So we're just finding ways around it. This is what I want to make the point. I want to look the solutions in the eye and say this to you. We're not making any excuses. We recognize that in order to achieve the economic goals that we have, in order to be able to achieve the goals to make sure that every single St. Lucian achieves a minimum standard of living. And part that means what? If I live in Masha or if I live in Bruceville, I should have the same level of security as if I live in Cap Estate. That's the goal that we have. And we're committed to making that happen. We were in a deep hole, much deeper than my government had expected, but we're not deterred. We're making the resources available, but unfortunately, some of those things take time. I only hope that time doesn't run out on me, but it will not be from a lack of trying.
With regard again to this matter involving the Americans, did you ever raise the Leahy law issue with the U.S. President Donald Trump? Because you had the opportunity.
No, I did not have an opportunity. I did not meet him on a personal basis. I met him on a collective basis. So we sat in a room with the other 5 prime ministers in the room. But I have spoken to his people. So we've spoken both to the officials at the White House. We've met with congresspersons. We've met with the State Department. We've met with a multitude of people.
So it wouldn't have been appropriate to raise the issue with the president in the open, considering that the seriousness of this matter?
But there's nothing that he can do. You know, this is
Donald Trump?
Donald Trump cannot.
If he wants,
he cannot.
He can do something about it.
He cannot do anything about it. The Leahy law is the Leahy law. It's passed by Congress. And there's a mechanism in order to be able to get off the Leahy law. And most part, because Mexico, Jamaica, all of them have a Leahy law imposed on them. The fundamental difference was that they have different departments.
The Republicans, they control the Senate.
It doesn't matter. The law's already passed. And so there's a mechanism that both the State Department and the Defense Department have to work on. It's a joint decision, but more importantly, before it gets to anybody to make a decision, there's a checklist of things that the technocrats have to approve of.
What's your prediction on this? How do you think in the final analysis that this will be settled? Will it be settled in the first place?
We are juggling a multitude of things. Police morale, that there's some people, well, I think if we did a poll in St. Lucia, that most St. Lucians would have believed that Restore Confidence was a good program. And so therefore, we have to marry it between what public opinion is, what the morale of the police force are, what the transparency is, the rule of law, and also now the Leahy situation, right? And we as a government have to balance all of those things. And I just want to say to you, I am not deterred. We're not overwhelmed. We have a very clear strategy on how we want to do it. And I remain very hopeful that we're going to get this issue resolved. But I am not going to use an excuse that we've not been able to solve our problems because of the Leahy law. If there's one thing the Leahy law has impacted, is that there are a group of police officers who have been involved in this case and been identified, and certainly it has affected their morale. Many of them are some of the best police officers that we had. So you have 2 impacts. One, the loss of some really good officers and the experience of those officers, and it also affects the morale, and it also, think of you. I'm going to go out and do my job, and if I'm overly aggressive, there's a possibility that the court system and the judicial system is actually going to incarcerate me. It creates a level of hesitancy. And that's why I say to the police officers, in part, the biggest problem here was the lack of discipline. So by not having proper administrative procedures, it then doesn't create the level of transparency that you would want. And so therefore, it doesn't create a trail of evidence in order to be able to help these police officers. But my understanding is that the recommendations that were made in the impacts report, many of those things have been addressed, And I would hope that it would be substantially more difficult for what happened to us would happen to us. We have actually seen instances of where police officers were involved in killings. In some cases, they have been let go, and in some cases, they actually have been charged.
How far are you willing to go to address this crime problem in St. Lucia? For example, in Jamaica, you had states of emergency. Are you willing to go down that route if it becomes necessary? Curfews.
Whatever it is going to take, we've not gotten to that point yet. Sadly, the types of crimes that we have that have been on the increase have been car thefts, robberies, and burglaries. And these are really not good crimes because it takes away the safety of people and the areas in which it's taking place. As a result of it, we have brought on 40 additional policemen. We've put on patrols because we think that the presence of the police officers is important. We've beefed up the traffic department. The idea now we're going to have smart cameras, meaning that a camera can take the picture of a license plate, immediately associate with, in fact, it's on the car it's supposed to be on. So trying to be much more proactive in terms of deterring some of these errors. The watch groups that we've seen, the improvement in the watch groups. So fingerprinting, DNA, all these things, being much more proactive in terms of trying to figure out the ring, the circle of criminals that are taking place. So I get a weekly report with the Attorney General as well as the Minister of Security. We meet with Cabinet as well on a regular basis to make sure that we're on track.
As a National Security Council?
This thing of the National Security Council. At the end of the day, my cabinet has made crime a priority. Okay, so we keep cabinet abreast on a regular basis of what we're doing. Myself, the Attorney General, and the Minister of Security, and whichever other minister we need to recruit if it's necessary, meet on a weekly basis. We get now independent reports as to the progress the policemen are making, police officers, sorry, that they're making. Because you have to be able to track it. And they have to be able to give us very clear strategies. So the meetings can be very tough sometimes because they will come back and say, Prime Minister, we need these extra people, we need this, we need that. And in the absence of these things, we can't resolve it. And my answer to them is, I can make as much resources as I possibly can, but I'm not going to use that as an excuse. You've got to find more creative ways. And see, that's where the morale and the cooperation of the police officers come in.
Are you looking forward to including the opposition in this? Because I think an attempt was made earlier this year in Jamaica to have a National Security Council headed by the Prime Minister and include various government ministers, foreign affairs, also the National Security Minister and the heads of the security forces. Are you looking forward to including the opposition as is being done in Jamaica?
I don't know yet. I just really wish that we had developed a relationship with, or had a relationship with the opposition in which I felt that there were some issues that we could work jointly on. There's a review taking place of Parliament. There's supposed to be committees in Parliament. They don't meet. Both sides are to blame on that issue. I'm not so sure how practical at this point that's going to be, Tim. But I can say to you, I think that we should be giving and getting the policemen to give the opposition some updates. And I think that that's something that we should implement, where they can meet with them independently. So for instance, when the IMF and the World Bank come here, they meet with the opposition. When CDB comes here, they meet with the opposition. I think that maybe this would be really one of those things in which the police officers can do that. There's certainly nothing that would have ever prohibited the leader of the opposition, if he wanted to have asked the Commissioner of Police to be able to give him a report. I mean, he's officially recognized in our Constitution as part of our government system.
But quite apart from a report, what about giving the opposition an opportunity to make recommendations with regard to the crime-fighting effort?
They're always free to make those recommendations.
But not to sit around the table as part of a national security council?
As I said, I think that would be a little bit impractical at this point. But I think that certainly letting them know what's taking place, and they're always welcome to provide any form of information. The leader of the opposition wanted to have a meeting with me to give us advice, or if he wanted to meet with the Minister of Security, wanted to meet with the Attorney General, he's always free to do that. My government remains always very open to any ideas and suggestions. But to say that we're going to make him a formal part of the National Security Council. We've not gotten to that point yet.
You're watching Newsmaker Live. My guest this evening is Prime Minister Alan Chastanet. Also watching the broadcast on Facebook. We have a chat room. You could put your questions there, and we will be going through those questions later in the program. Let's take a break. Back in just a moment. Welcome back to you. Thank you so much for staying with us. Those of you watching on Facebook as well as on your television sets, you're watching Newsmaker Live with me, Timothy Polion, and my guest is Prime Minister Alan Chastanet. Mr. Prime Minister, let's turn our attention to another bugbear, one issue certainly that is of tremendous concern to the people of St. Lucia, and that is health care. What is happening to the OKEU Hospital and St. Jude? Let's look at OKEU. How soon are you hoping to ensure that it's fully functional?
We're hoping that we'll be fully functional by March. The transition continues in January. The team of consultants are here with us. In fact, there's 17 people here going through a whole review process, working with the board and working with the Ministry of Health to come up with that plan. I'm very happy that the air conditioning system that was giving us problems, the electrical system that was giving us problems, that we've been able to resolve those issues for the most part. There are 5 chillers, my understanding is at the facility. We have 3 of the chillers up and running. The new organizational chart, the training to be able to transition people over. So we're on track now for March to be fully operational over at OKEU. The big issue really is going to be the cost. So there is going to be a huge increase in the cost of healthcare in this country.
And how will it be financed?
It's coming out of my budget. So we've been spending about $110, $120 million a year on healthcare. That number we expect to go up to $150, $160 million. We've just had to include it in the budget. You have to do this. I mean, we have no choice. You can't stay in Victoria anymore. There's no way of keeping Victoria operational. It actually should have been closed a long time ago. We can't stay in the stadium. So what we're doing at St. Jude's, we're spending a tremendous amount of money on primary health care. So we've smart facilities, meaning about 14 of them have been upgraded to be hurricane resilient, to have their own generators, standby water, the facility to be able to do solar energy, so that if we're cut off from the grid, that they can be self-sufficient. We're now spending $20 million on upgrading all 42 facilities with new equipment. Part of that is because the number of beds that we're going to have at OKU are going to be reduced. We still have to be able to provide some other services. So for instance, the healthcare center that's on Chaussee needs to be upgraded significantly. So that's a very large cost that we're going to have to. Getting the polyclinic now to be 24/7 in Gros-Islet. Trying to find ways to be able to spread the dialysis out to more centers. So the new Soufriere mini hospital that we're going to build will have dialysis facilities in them. We would like to have dialysis facilities up north, and with given the traffic and everything else, the number of people that are using it from those locations. So we're making significant progress, and I think that this year will be a huge turnaround in the quality of healthcare that we're going to have in this country. And the one thing that I'm the most excited about is healthcare insurance. So again, when you ask how we're going to fund all of this, we've accepted as a government that we will pay the cost of the salaries and the utilities and the capital cost for healthcare in general in St. Lucia, not private practices, and that the insurance will only have to pay for private visits, prescriptions, and basic surgeries. So that it will be compulsory for everybody to have healthcare insurance. So it means a lot of people currently today who are really self-insured now will have a card that will allow them to go and get a checkup. If they need prescriptions because their blood pressure is too high, that will be included in the insurance. It's also going to give us the capacity to understand the real health status of the country. Because we're not going to have statistics anymore. We're going to have real numbers, and we'll know at what stage people are. And so that means that the Ministry of Health's programs can be substantially more targeted, and we have the ability to measure the results. So we've put a lot of work into this, these new processes, the establishment of OKEU, the decision to fix St. Jude's, because that was a huge problem, and also now the monies to be able to invest in all of the primary health care services.
But as far as the healthcare insurance is concerned, how soon are you hoping to implement it?
We'd like to get it started by June of next year. We had
But preceding that, you'll be having consultation with the various stakeholders. And normally that's a very that's a tedious process. There's a lot of arguing that takes place, haggling and so on, before there is some kind of resolution.
Well, the discussions have been going on for 3 years. So we've finally gotten to the point where the World Bank technicians have made a phenomenal presentation to us in terms of the way forward. There's another consultative process that's going to take place over the next 3 months. We're hoping that in January that we can make a cabinet decision now on the way forward, and then the idea would be to go to Parliament in April or May of next year to pass the required legislation to make this happen, and then with an implementation in June, July, or in August. But we know that in order to be able to afford the current system, we can't do it by ourselves. So there has to be a contribution by people. So the government will pay the insurance for the unemployed, for the vulnerable, and the elderly. So you do have elderly people who are on a pension, have no means of increasing the amount of income. So it would be unfair at this time, this juncture, to cause them to pay the insurance. So we're estimating that that's going to be somewhere between $30 and $40 million a year as to what the government's contribution is going to be.
What will be the contribution of other people? People who are, well, gainfully employed. Do you have a special tax will be imposed? Do you have?
It's a premium. You know, so no different than what happens with private insurance now. And generally speaking, in some businesses, the company puts in 50% and the employee puts in the other 50%. So that one of the next steps for the entity is actually to crunch those numbers to make a determination as to what we think that premium is going to be. So I have an idea as to what I think that number is going to be, but I don't want to make that number public, but we believe it's a number that people can afford. But the difference is going to be, right, Tim, is that I think that people don't mind paying a tax or an insurance premium as long as they know what they're going to get in return. So, you know, with the gas tax, you know you're paying the gas tax and you know where the money is going and which roads are getting fixed up. If in fact you're making a contribution to an insurance premium, you know that entitles you to your private doctor visits, prescriptions, and basic surgeries, and that there is a quality healthcare system that you're part of. So I think generally when I meet with people, they're much more comfortable with that rather than all this money going into a general coffer and a politician is making the decisions to how much is going to go here and how much is going to go there.
But why are you so confident that people will agree to paying a particular tax if they don't know the amount?
Well, we've not made it compulsory yet, but we intend to make it compulsory. But we have to have those numbers. I can't go to Parliament and make a pronouncement without having what those numbers are. So we will, and we kind of understand what we think that people are willing to pay and not willing to pay. Right now, to just give you a ceiling number, in the private community, they pay on average $1,200 a year. So $600 the company pays and $600 is what the employee pays. I don't believe the system we're going to run, because everybody is going to be involved, is going to be in excess of that amount of money.
St. Jude Hospital.
Yep.
The government certainly has failed the people of the South, considering that this hospital should have been completed a very long time ago by both previous administrations, SLP and UWP. Why is it taking so long? You're about to enter your 4th year in office, and yet still this health institution, much needed, particularly in the South, has not been completed.
It's a really tough one to be able to explain to people. I mean, certainly when we came into office, and all the information that had been provided to us is that the hospital was supposed to open up in July of 2016. Okay? I really thought that was imminent, honestly. I remember the day that we went there to see if we could get into the hospital. We were denied access into the hospital. Certainly with all the pronouncements the government was making, I had no reason to doubt that the hospital was close to being open. We now know that in April of 2016 that Dr. Anthony got a letter from Halcro and from Shanta King to basically say the hospital will not be open in July, that the hospital needed another $60 or $70 million to be completed, and that they're hoping to have it completed by the end of the year. So I didn't see that letter initially. What I did is I had sent Minister Joseph and also the Minister of Health, Mary Isaac, to go and do a tour. Guy came back and he said to me, PM, this hospital is really far away. I said, you must be joking, Guy. He said, no, I'm telling you. What I saw there's no plan, there's no this. I said, you cannot be telling me the truth. So what we did is we hired immediately a technical company, FDL, who put together a team of experts from Italy and from Barbados, University of West Indies, to immediately go and do an audit for us. And they came back within 6 months and gave me a report which basically said that this building had many flaws in it. Okay? And so to remedy that situation, it was going to cost in excess of $80 to $100 million but they couldn't confirm that number for me because there were parts of the building that would have to be demolished. And it's not until those parts are demolished they would truly understand the extent of what they had to do. I then asked FDL, I said, okay, we need to open up this hospital. Can we go back to the original plan, which was really what it started as, was to replace the old St. Jude's? Can you give me that? And that I could at least transfer the people from the stadium into this facility. He came back and he said, the way that this place is designed, that's going to take anywhere between $60 and $80 million, and maybe I can get it in 8 to 9 months to a year. But again, Prime Minister, that is going to depend heavily on what we find. So when you start talking that kind of quantum of money, trying to fix something that's still not going to be even close to being acceptable, you then have to start rethinking. And I want to say that my approach, I don't think would be very different from a lot of other people's approach. If you were to build a hospital today, what do you think it would look like? You know, most modern hospitals are one building. So if you look at OKE as an example, which was a hospital designed many years ago, yeah? It is one core center with fingers, but you can walk to everything within the hotel, within the hospital. The St. Jude's one, 16 different buildings with, you know, open air walkways, ramps that were too steep, walls were too narrow, all kinds of flaws. It certainly would not be what's in your mind. So when we went to Cayman, and I deliberately diverted, because I was on my way to Turks and Caicos after the hurricane, and I diverted to Cayman, and I went to see Cayman Health City, and I saw the hospital that built there. I saw how fast they built the hospital. I knew the best way was to build a new hospital, because to fix the old one was going to be too difficult. Once you've made that decision now, you don't want to repeat the mistakes that the first group made, which was what? There was no plan. There was no planning approval. They never knew how much money they were going to have. I mean, a little team was put together to say, go get money from the Canadians, go get money from the EU, go and get money from this different group. Okay? They only got $20 million from the Taiwanese. And people say, well, how come Dr. Anthony didn't spend the full 20? So imagine in April of 2016, when he was given the news that it was going to cost $80 more million to finish the hospital. The $10 million US he had there wasn't going to finish that. And I believe that that's one of the reasons why he ended up calling the elections a bit early, because he wasn't going to complete it. So we know we had to get the money, which we did. We had to get the designs done, which we have. We had to get planning approval, which we did. And now we've started the construction.
But why did it take 3.5 years?
Well, you know, I refer you to Shanta King's document that the leader of the opposition waved around. To do a hospital generally is going to take you 6 to 7 years, from planning, right, to execution. We're doing it in a faster track time because of the emergency that we have. And I want to say thank you to the Taiwanese government for agreeing to lend us the money to be able to do this, and to be able to have the OECC, who have built hospitals in the past, to be able to do all the FF&E for us is also a great opportunity. But we had to design the hospital. We had to then get the approvals. We had to meet with the Ministry of Health and also a whole bunch of other people to get everybody's input, get it approved. So I'm actually very proud of the time that we've done it. But I also acknowledge, given what has happened, people are impatient. So it was a very difficult thing for me as Prime Minister, but I didn't leave the job to anybody else, to go and meet with the staff at St. Jude's at the stadium, to break the news to them. These are people that on 3 occasions were told they were moving. And teams of people got them all excited, and all the plans were done, and each time they were let down. And as I indicated to them, that what I would have to spend in order to move faster was going to be a problem. If I have a regret, Tim, is that immediately on seeing where these things were going, my intention was to bring in a mobile hospital. So it would have taken 30 days, 45 days to set up a mobile facility. And I regret I allowed people to convince me otherwise. And everybody said, PM, if you do that, look how long we've been into a temporary facility at the cultural center, right? And people are automatically going to be making that association. But I felt it was important, particularly for the staff, right? To at least give them a more purpose-built design in order to give the comfort and the safety for the general public. If I have a regret, that's the regret. But I want to say that I want to thank the staff at St. Jude's, the doctors, the nurses, the administrators, for the incredible job that they have done in buying into the policy. I know not willingly, so I'm not going to sit here and say everybody was convinced, but I wanted to really thank them for agreeing and the level of service that they're providing at the stadium. And that's why I was a bit disappointed when one of the things that the staff had identified was the roof that kept coming off. And so therefore we had moved to take off the roof. And you see the opposition. On one hand, you're complaining that it's an inadequate facility. When efforts are being made now to fix up the facility, there's also a problem with that. But I'm a novice at politics in many ways, and I'm learning that you have to be very determined, but at the same time respectful.
One other issue, access to the nation's beaches. Just recently, Sugar Beach issued a press release saying, among other things, that all vehicles wishing to come onto the property to drop off guests wishing to access the beach will be required to pay US $100 per guest. Guests will be bused from the car park to and from the beach. Are you aware of this?
I was aware of it the same time as the public, which I have to say I spoke to the hotel. I was extremely disappointed, particularly the fact that the hotel is under new ownership. And that there was no consultation. So my understanding from the hotel is that they're saying that there was consultation at the SMA level and at the ministerial level. I said something as significant as this, I'd have expected that you would have told the rep, who also happens to be the Minister of Infrastructure. You would have told the Minister of Tourism. Anyway, immediately upon hearing the news, spoke to the management. We've gotten them to withdraw the statement or withdraw the implementation of any of these policies. There's a team going down there tomorrow, headed by Mr. Clem Bob, who is the head of the chairman of the DCA, to be able to have a discussion. But I want to say that many of the things that they were attempting to do there were illegal. So in their planning, there is a requirement for them to provide vehicular access. The dock that is there, the jetty, is on the seabed. There is no lease to the seabed, and so therefore they don't have the right to charge anything on the dock. The other thing that we were very clear to them is that they have the added burden that this is a World Heritage Site. This is the patrimony of the people of St. Lucia. And so to have any actions that is perceived as diminishing people's access to their own World Heritage Site is absolutely unacceptable. So I want to say that my government does not support the interventions being recommended, but my government also recognizes some of the difficulties we're having. And this is not an issue that arose today, is that we have a large number of new cruise ship arrivals coming in. They like to go to the beach. My very entrepreneurial boatmen, a lot of them coming from Barron's Drive, are bringing people down to these beaches. And what my government has been doing is improving other beach facilities. So Hummingbird Beach. And what we keep on saying to the young guys is, when you bring tourists to the Hummingbird Beach, it is your sister, it is your cousin, it's your neighbor who's getting the business, not Anne Chastanet or Jalousie. But we have to make sure that the standard of those beach facilities are at quality level. So we now have washroom facilities, we have restaurant facilities. We've done 2 other beaches in the Anse area. A third one now is opening up in Canaries. We're improving the beach facilities up north. And so we think that the way to avoid the congestion at Anne Chastanet Beach as well as the Jalousie Beach is to provide alternatives that are as good, if not better, one that they're getting. But to believe that you're going to solve this problem by instituting prices, that's not going to solve the problem. And that policy of theirs would not be supported by my government.
How do you once and for all send the correct message to investors, particularly hoteliers, that people definitely have access to our beaches and no covert or any attempt, openly and otherwise, should be made to kind of discourage or deter people, certainly sometimes, from going on to the various beaches and accessing them?
So I swear I would not get into anything controversial tonight. There is a perception in people's minds that that's exactly what the Queen's Chain does. But that's not true. What does that is the covenants in the deed or in the planning approval that you get. So the conditions of your planning approval. And that's where we have to make sure that we're very clear. What is not good? So for instance, we had a developer that bought Honeymoon Beach. Honeymoon Beach has been sold 3 or 4 times since 1984. Each time a plan has been submitted, planning approval has been made. So when these people bought the property, there was no liens on it, there was no asterisks on it. They thought they were buying a property that was free and clear. So all of a sudden, their planning approval is imminent to be given to them. And then one of our societies came up and said, hey, there was a study in 1982 that says that there are many Amerindian artifacts on that property. Now, who should pay for the study? Should it be the developer that when he bought the land, nobody had told him that? Maybe he would not have bought the land. So we negotiated with them. They wanted us to originally dig up the whole site. We said we can't do that. We brought in a really qualified company from Martinique, and what they do is they bore holes and take samples, hundreds of samples. They didn't find anything. So there's a mechanism, but certainly in artifacts, there has to be, I think, a national policy that says that while you're doing construction, if you find any artifacts, you are to stop and bring the necessary people in. In terms of access to the beach, there has to be conditions, whether it's in the DCA approval or whether we're giving a lease on the Queen's Chain, that embedded in the lease clearly identifies what the public's rights are. And the public must also understand, because we're putting a development there, the idea of driving a car on the beach, the idea of riding a horse on the beach, the idea of coming in and having a bonfire and having a big party and playing wild music, that may not be necessary. But I think all sides need to be clearly informed as to what we can do. And the only way to do that, Tim, is to include it written into either the covenants of the deed of the Queen's Chain or to do it through the planning approval.
So why should we continue to have projects where hotels are constructed close to our beaches? Why not do otherwise?
Well, the good news is that we're seeing some development. So you have Ladera, you have Hotel Chocolat, you have other developments that are taking place off of the beach site. But unfortunately, I would say to you that a significant attraction to come to the Caribbean, and because we have sold it like that over the years, is sun, sand, and beach. So it's a legitimate part. So for instance, if you take Sandy Beach and the development we're going to do there, when you get to the bottom of the runway, the idea is to cut a new road as you get to the concrete road. That new road will go along the fence of the airport. So it means that the new entrance to Vieux Fort Town will actually come where the bus stations are by the gas station. We intend to convert the concrete road into a boardwalk, and that the hotel developments, which will be lots smaller hotels made available to allow locals to be able to afford to build properties there, will be behind the boardwalk, and that there is no development other than washroom facilities and recreational facilities on the beach itself. That's the kind of development I love. I remember speaking to Sir John when we were building Rodney Bay at the Causeway. That's exactly what I would have liked to have seen, is some kind of road in the front that would have allowed the beach to remain public and the hotels in the back. But then you get to a point where we've passed that. So you have either existing properties that are being purchased that are already on the beach. How do you remedy that situation? So if you take the Rodney Bay Beach, classic example, very public beach. And we say it's public, but where are the public washrooms? Where is it that you can get a meal at a local price? Yeah? So these are some of the things that we're going to have to be able to address moving forward. Some of them have to be remedies, and some of them are not going to be perfect, but certainly we have a lot of land still to be developed, and we have to be able to make those decisions moving forward.
Reforming our constitution, is that on your agenda?
I think there's aspects of it. I think right now one of the top priorities is certainly the boundaries. The case is still in court, but there was a letter or a report that was done by the Commonwealth Secretariat that made several recommendations. The census is coming in 2020, and one of the recommendations is border changes, boundary changes should be attached to the census. So I think that that's one of the really critical ones that we need to be able to achieve. We have to be able to bring transparency, accountability, and fairness in our electoral process. We saw what happened in Dominica. I mean, it was, according to the law, free and clear. And there are no financial contribution limitations. They have an electoral system, as the government has said, that has been in place for a lot of years, okay? So according to law, they've not broken the law, but I think that there are people who can say there's some unfairness in this, right? And those things have to be adjusted. In our particular situation, the Constitution requires that all constituencies be of equal size. If you take a 20% sensitivity, meaning that we'll allow it to be 20% plus or 20% minus of what that number is, so 17 seats divided by the total number of voters we have. It says that no constituency should be less than 6,000, and no constituency should be more than 9,000. Okay? More than half of our seats are in breach of that. And that's a change. So you mean you're talking about Gros-Islet in excess of 26,000 people, one rep. You know, and Spider keeps complaining because the resources are given to him as if he is one constituency. He's actually 3 constituencies. And so we try our best to balance that out. But it's a problem. And it's also a misrepresentation for many of the people there. You have Dennery South, 4,500. Okay, Labrie, 6,000, just on the borderline. So you have a lot of constituencies that are in excess of 12,000. So we need to solve that problem. And the question is how soon we can do it. And that would require constitutional change, because the system we have has not been able to keep up with the times and allow us to be progressive.
You're looking forward to making the changes before the next general election during 2021?
It would be great. I would love to do that, but there are a lot of boxes that have to be checked. So one, that we have to settle the court case. And 2, either agree
Was that the legal action taken by Mr. Guy Joseph?
Correct. And 2, you would then have to either agree to make the constitutional change or follow some of the recommendations that were made by the Commonwealth Report that was done in 1997 that are still relevant today. And that would still require the cooperation of the opposition. So I would like to say I would like to see the changes. I think it's necessary, but that requires cooperation among both parties. We did have 3 ex-prime ministers when I first came in, headed by Joe Clark, who was the former Prime Minister of Canada, working with us to try to remedy that problem. And we just weren't able to get to an agreement with the opposition and ourselves as to how to be able to proceed.
Term limits. The Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis has passed legislation in the Parliament there, Dr. Timothy Harris. Are you hoping to follow suit?
I think there should be term limits. You know, there's some crazy cases out there. So, for instance, if you take Paraguay, you know, it's 1 term for 4 years. I teased the president. I said, "Man, you must be on vacation. I mean, what do you really can achieve in 4 years?" Mexico, it's 1 term of 6 years. So I'm not so sure in a small island like this that any of those systems would necessarily work. 2 terms may be too short of a time. But I think a limitation of 3. But certainly, will make that debate available, that we can have that discussion, and I certainly would support some form of term limit.
How soon?
This year.
The discussion. Next year,
Yeah.
you're hoping to have this discussed in our parliament?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
Now-
not only in the parliament, but I have to first have the discussion within my party. Yeah, so the way my system works is I have to go to my party first, get it endorsed, and then once it's endorsed, it gives me now a position to be able to debate in parliament. But we had spoken about term limits in my party. We had not come to a definitive number. I felt in my mind 2 terms. Some people feel 2 terms is too short. Maybe 3 terms should be the maximum. That's all to be debated.
But why should you consult your party?
Oh, because I have a Democratic
Isn't
Party.
it for the greater good of the country as opposed to just a select few?
It's not a select few. My party is over 400 people that participate in my convention. And then you have members all throughout. I'm very clear that when we came into government that we had a manifesto and a vision and mission that had been approved by my party, by the highest body in my party. Yeah?
Do you have your own timeline by when you would want to demit office or not to contest elections in St. Lucia?
You know, I had said, and I'm still very much of that mindset, that 10 years. You know, I would like to win a second term. I feel that it would have been unjust and unfair to say to the people of St. Lucia, I'm going to put a 5-year plan in. You can't achieve enough. So what we have done is put a 10-year plan in with the hopes, and you were making that point earlier, that we're able to achieve enough in the first 5 years to get the support and the confidence of the people of St. Lucia to be able to continue. But we have a 10-year plan. I would like to be here for the 10 years. By the 10th year, I would be close to 65. I have 2 young kids who will probably be in their late teens and early 20s. There are a lot of things I still would like to do personally in my life, and 65 is old, but it's not so old that I can't do them. I have a lot of confidence of the other people in my party, and I'm seeing some young people, I'm seeing some people who have gotten a tremendous amount of experience. And I generally think that sometimes getting somebody at the helm with a different perspective is a good thing, versus one person staying there for that long period of time. But we will get there, and I will be guided by my party.
So if you contest the next general election, you win, that will be it, your last term?
I would like to say so. You know, but again, I would say to ultimately the persons to make the decision will be the members of my party, but certainly not more than 3 terms.
You're watching NewsMaker Live. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be hearing from you with your calls for my guest. Once again, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Mr. Alain Chastanet, right here on NewsMaker Live.
Horses.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. You are watching Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television. We are also on Facebook. Put the telephone number on the screen right now so that you can call with your questions and the comments for my guest. He is the island's Prime Minister. We already have a caller line.
Yeah.
Good evening to you, Newsmaker Live. You're on the air.
Yeah, good evening, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Honorable Prime Minister, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Honorable Prime Minister, I heard you said something at the beginning of the show. Are you saying that the Jamaican had a report and it was not delivered to the DPP?
The report was eventually delivered to the DPP. So what happened was the Jamaicans, which is called the impacts report, was done in the absence of the participation of the DPP. The report was then sent to the then Prime Minister, who then, if you remember, went on TV and made certain pronouncements about it, and then sent the report as it was to the DPP. The DPP then wrote back and said that she needed, one, resources, as well as she needed the evidence. Neither one of those were provided to the DPP, so all she got was a basic report.
So is the government of St. Lucia the ones who paid for that report?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Once again, we continue to take your calls for the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. You can call right now. Another call. Good evening to you. You are on the air.
Good night.
Hi.
Second, please.
Yes.
Good night, Mr. Prime Minister. Tim, I would
Good
like
evening
to
to you,
thank you very much for inviting our Prime Minister to your show.
Mm-hmm.
That was very nice of you. However, I have a question for our Prime Minister. Prime Minister, we have our visitors coming to shore, and the first group of persons we will admit that they meet, they are the taxi drivers. And we all will agree that I don't think that they've been recognized or enough is being done to help them with transporting those guests with, in good comfort. In that recently concessions were given to minibus drivers, but yet nothing for many years has not been done, or nobody has helped taxi drivers, and a lot is expected of a taxi driver. The vehicle must be clean at all times, and you must be at your best, proper training and all of that, because we are basically ambassadors. We represent our country, and we must say most of us, we do a very good job at it. What is it that could be done to help, and when would you reopen the concession for taxi drivers? That's one question. I'm hoping that I'm not jumping and you will not forget. The other question I have is Dennery. We had a hotel and we understand that they lost money, and the hotel is just sitting there, and it's an eyesore. Is it Dennery or somewhere in that area there?
Probably.
Yeah, Poale. And it's very embarrassing that most time the guests would ask questions, and I would try to make an excuse for that. I cannot answer these questions, so maybe you can. Ancillary, we have so many nice beaches in Ancillary. So many good opportunities could be given.
Beaches,
I'm sorry?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yes, continue.
Two nice beaches.
Oh, yes. So Ancillary, we have so many nice beaches in Ancillary and the boats docking there, but yet I don't find that the people of Ancillary, they're getting enough out of the tourism dollar. Maybe you could reconsider and help me, maybe ask investors to go down there and invest a little bit more. Fourthly, I'm hoping that you could remember these questions. The hotel sales and its taxes. Most times the hoteliers, when they you could correct me, when they realize it's time to pay, the taxes and it's too high, they change hands, and I find that maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, that the country is not really benefiting enough when it comes to taxes, and as it relates to the staff, the hotel will, yes, it's true that they create a certain amount of employment, but what is it that our country is really benefiting from these hotels, from these investors, when they leave with so much money that the country too could benefit a little bit from? And I understand that they're investors, but so anyway.
Okay, thank you so much for calling, sir. Okay, let's look at the concessions for taxi drivers.
This was actually a very heavy debate at my last cabinet meeting. The issue here, Tim, is that we have a sector that has been allowed to grow unregulated. So if you'll know, in St. Lucia, we have an M plate, which is for the minibus drivers. You have a TX plate for taxi drivers. You have an H plate, okay? But between the TX and the H can be used for a rent-a-car, the H can be used as a taxi, the H can be used for a tour bus. But we now have luxury cars, we have tour buses, we have mass transportation, a whole multitude of new entities that have come up. The proposals that have been put on the table to us is to cause people to select. So you either have to decide you're going to be a rent-a-car or you're going to be a taxi. We're now finding that we think that that's going to be too cumbersome. So the Minister of Tourism and the Minister of Transportation have been working. I've given them now until January to resolve this issue, because we've not been able to give the concessions to some of the other people that we want to be able to get. But it is my government's intention to have that resolved and to be able to provide incentives for the taxi drivers on a regular basis.
The parity issue?
The parity, the project went out of business because of CLECO on a different issue, and it's now under the ownership of the government of Trinidad. There's been a price that's been set for the project. No developer has come by as yet willing to buy that project. So I'm hoping, I've heard people come in, so on a regular basis people do come by to be able to look at that project. I look at that project right now and I look at it as a great university, because to develop the beach on the East Coast is a lot of money. But somebody else may come by, and as we see the market continue to return, there may be somebody else who's willing to come in and develop that. So unfortunately, all you can tell the taxi drivers is that that's a prime example of when we had the world recession as to causing that problem. In terms of ancillary...
You have a call at 9? Hello? Okay, well, that's that call.
In terms of ancillary, look, we've put together what we've done in Soufriere with what we call village tourism. Next project is ancillary in Gros Islet.
Okay, well, at point, sir. We have a call. Good evening to you, NewsMakerlive. You're on the air. Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Prime Minister.
Good evening.
I am really happy that for the first time I'm able to speak to the Prime Minister. So, my question to you this evening is this. There is a school for special needs children. I noticed that yesterday I observed that there was I think the day for the special needs, was it?
A walk.
And then there was a walk, right, to commemorate that. And also today you had some children from the special needs schools to come over to your residence to meet you. And I'm sure that must have been a wonderful experience for you.
It was completely.
And for the children. Did it take place?
Yes, it did.
Okay. My question to you is this. What is going to happen to these children's school? What has happened to the Donata school so far? And when will we see a school for special needs, for the differently abled children? I mean, I know these children are now being, they have to go to the school at Leslieland, but when will they have their special school like every other child? You understand? This is what I would really want to know. And my next question, real quickly, the road being done on the Castries-Grosley Highway, the fixing of the road, the new road being built, when will that be finished?
Thank you so much for calling.
Thank you.
I want to say, that every year I look forward to this party we do for kids from special needs. They come from Soufriere and Vieux Fort and Dennery, and from Donato and from Gros-Islet. It was an event that was started by Stephenson King, and Dr. Anthony continued it. I think that all of us, if you speak to that, it's one day of the year that we really genuinely look forward to go to. Because you meet these kids, you know. I've not met one of them to be crying. They're all smiling. They're all giving hugs and kisses. And you see kids, and I don't mean that in a bad way, that are less fortunate than us. And yet they seem so much more content. And it makes me question sometimes how we are and how we live. Today when I did the interview, I made the point exactly what the lady said. That while I recognize the importance of today and how much they enjoy it, the bigger impact is really going to be fixing up the schools. And the Minister of Education and CDB have approved the project. The money's already coming in to be able now to address each of those schools. I mean, I was hearing a horror story about the special needs school in Dennery with regards to the roof. Rory McNamara, who is the chairman for a long time of the Donato School, we're promised to meet early in January to be able to talk about that. And some of the new equipment that we're getting in is really going to help. Now the question is, there's some kids that need to go to a special school, but we also now need to make our other schools more receptive. So I was telling the story of the kid from Dennery, that he was graduating to the next class, but wasn't as excited. And I said, why not? He said, because it's one more floor that my friends have to carry me.
Okay.
Yeah? So there are kids who want, even though they have special needs, to be part and assimilated into the system, because most kids I meet, they want to be independent. And I think that our system is failing us because we're not even giving those kids an opportunity to do that.
Let's go to the call. Good evening to you, Newsmaker Live. You on the air?
This is Timothy.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
I'd like to kindly ask the Prime Minister, what does it mean? I listened to him this morning speaking to Andre, Russell, and Charlie. And what I'm understanding, if I'm wrong, correct me, that Miss Janine Compton is too political. What does that mean?
Okay, thank you so much. Go ahead.
I never said she was too political. I said that there was a process to select to select the new director of the National Trust. There was a list of 10 people. It was shortlisted to 4. Of the 4 people, the 2 first people turned down the job. Mrs. Compton was the 3rd person that was offered the job. They then realized that they had to come to the minister for approval. And I think that there's a reason for that. That's actually as part of the act that the minister has to give approval, because it's an agency that we work very closely with. I don't believe that what the needs of the National Trust are, that Ms. Compton is the best person to do that job. Furthermore, that I feel that Ms. Compton used to be a member of our party. She left our party, opened up her own party, had made some allegations, and there is a friction between myself and Ms. Compton. So even after the election, there is not even I would say to a respectful relationship. Now, the relationship between the trust and government is already one that is naturally tense, because government wants to develop, the trust wants conservation. If you further aggravate the situation and don't put personalities in place that at least can find some kind of compromise position, it's going to be difficult. So I just think that right now, for the trust's sake and also for the government, that she's not the best candidate at this point, and because there's a lot of work to be done.
We have another call. Good evening to you, Newsmaker Live. You on the air? Hello, good evening to you. Okay, we lost that call.
I just want to answer really quickly.
Yes,
the Shock Road, I believe that they're on the last part of it. I saw the road being fully cleared, so hopefully they're just going to tarmac it. So I'm hoping that by this week that will be completed. Really quickly, ancillary, we're doing a lot of work. The gentleman spoke about pegs with taxis. The prices of taxi fares are regulated, and it's in a contract agreement. Generally speaking, there's a contract between the taxi association and its hotel, so they can't just replace them that easily. Not saying never, but our system we would like to see is that there isn't a peg system. But again, that's part of the new structure that will be coming in.
Good evening, thanks for holding on. You on the air?
Good evening, Mr. Timothy.
Good evening to you, caller.
Good evening, Honorable Prime Minister.
Good evening, sir.
I heard the taxi driver call in regards to concessions a while ago. But police officers were in the recent negotiations promised the concession as well. Are you still looking into that, sir?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Concessions for the police.
Oh, for
Yes,
the police?
concessions for the police in the recent negotiations.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot.
We basically, our belief is that people who are providing essential services, your policemen and your air traffic controllers in particular, and your firemen, should not have to rely on the public system, the public bus system, because when they're being called on duty, it may not be convenient to that public bus system. And we are looking at the ability to create a policy specifically for essential services.
Let's see if we can get 2 more calls once again for my guest, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Mr. Alain Chastanet. Let's see if we have a call. Mr. Producer, do we have a call on line? Good evening to you. NewsMakerlive, you're on the air.
Good night.
Good evening to you, caller.
Good night, Mr. Prime Minister.
Good night, sir.
Okay. Please, take your feedback for me, please.
I am
Hello?
concerned about the South, really, because, they have a lot of stuff going on in the South. I just wanted to say, since we have, 3-4 cruise ships coming in on the ports in Castries, how hard would it be to set up something temporary for the South to get at least 1 cruise ship down there so the people down there can at least get a bread from that?
Thank you so much for calling.
I'm very happy that you've made that observation. I've said the same thing. Unfortunately, the dock facilities currently in Vieux Fort are not structurally strong enough to be able to accommodate a cruise ship. But as you hopefully would have known, that we have signed an agreement with Carnival as well as with Royal Caribbean, and that they're going to be working with us on the development of Port Castries, not to expand the dock facilities, but to improve the quality of Castries, as well as now building a new home port facility in Vieux Fort, which will also be able to accommodate ships that are just coming in for the day. I have to tell you, I don't know why this not happened earlier, but my government fully supports this, and the goal is to have the first major ship come in by October of 2022.
Good evening to you. NewsMakerlive, you're on the air.
Hey, good night, Tim.
Terrible feedback. Address that for me, please. And then go ahead with your contribution call.
Good night, Tim, and good night, Mr. Prime Minister.
Good evening to you, sir.
I just want to say something. Do you believe we need a new highway from Pigeon Point to VG Street to ease up the congestion we have on the go-to highway? Just your opinion and my suggestion.
So
thank you so
Yep.
Okay.
So what we're doing is that in the $41 million that we have gotten from the Taiwanese to do road redevelopments, that a fair amount is being spent on the back roads to be able to now straighten those roads, widen those roads, and to put better signage so that people have alternative routes. But I would say to you, sir, that the real change is going to be the East Coast Highway. So from Darren-Sammy to Dennery to Vieux Fort, and then Dennery with a tunnel through the Barlow connecting into the Millennium Highway. That highway will act very much like the ABC Highway for those people who've been to Barbados. That is the game changer for St. Lucia because there's a lot of traffic that currently is coming from the south, going up to north and vice versa, that doesn't need to go through Castries. And there's not enough space. I mean, you see how much we've struggled with what we're doing currently at Shock just to widen the road. Imagine if we had to do that all along the road going up to north. And there's too many roads entering. There's no ability to stop it because we don't have enough land behind it to create, connecting roads and reduce the number of entry points. So my government is working aggressively on that. The reason why we increased the airport tax to $98 is that $25 goes to SLASPA, $35 goes towards paying the airport redevelopment, and $28 is being held aside to now go towards the funding of that major highway.
Final call. Good evening to you, NewsMakerlive. You on the air? Okay, it was a call, but we await another call once again. We have that call. Good evening to you, NewsMakerlive. You are on the air. Final call.
Yes, good night.
Good night to
and
you,
good night, Mr. Prime Minister.
Good night, ma'am.
My problem is the mold issue.
Mm-hmm.
I find every time there is the mold.
Okay, caller, you're listening to the television. Can you turn down the volume of the television and then continue your contribution?
Thank you.
Please? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I find every time they say the school has an issue, they would say they clean the place. But I never hear about finding the cause of the mold. To me, before they clean, they should find out what is causing the mold, fix it, clean, and then they will not have that problem again.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. That was our final call.
Yeah, so, the mold is a very vexing issue. Unfortunately, we're living in a very humid climate. Many of the schools themselves are old buildings. And so the walls are seeping. The humidity causes molds. Sometimes they've not replaced the roofs or the material in the roof, and that's also causing mold, so it's multifaceted. What we need to do a better job of, Tim, on all government buildings is to be more proactive, that there's regular testing of it, and we're not waiting in order for people to react. So we can't be using people as barometers. We actually must be much more proactive. And this was one of the things that my government inherited. When I went to meet the principal at Mondadon, right, which is a school built in 1982, 4,000 EC dollars a year for maintenance, 600 students. Think of that. The roof needed complete replacing, railings had been rotten, the bathrooms were not working. It was a disaster. And so part of the problem is when government does not have proper economic programs in place. Social is important, critical, but we must fund our own social. We can't keep depending on getting benevolence from overseas to fund our social programs. We must be in a position to afford it ourselves. So driving the economy, which sometimes I'm criticized of too much of a priority, he's too much of a business person, okay? But the fact is that we have to generate the resources. So why is it that only $1 million EC a year was being assigned to fix up 142 schools? Why is it that we were only spending $2 or $3 million a year to fix up roads when at minimum we should be spending $10 to $14 million on maintenance? Not even about developing new roads, just on maintaining the roads. And when years go by and you don't spend that amount of money, of course it's going to get worse. And so literally what has happened is we got into a position where the practice of the day is wait till people complain so much that we go then and fix it. And people's tolerance has been so great. I would like to think that what's happening in St. Lucia now, people are feeling more optimistic. People are seeing other buildings being fixed up and they're saying, why can't I get my building fixed up? And therefore we're seeing people agitate more than they have before. We welcome. We stand up to that challenge. The goal to be able to fix up all the schools. We spent $25 million. The report said we have to spend $40 million just to bring them to a minimum standard. So I don't want Solutions to believe for one moment that we're bragging as to how much we spent and that we've solved the problem. No, we're starting to address the problem. And we have much more to be able to do. But that's much more than what the previous government did. They basically were ostriches. They stuck their head in a hole and pretended that the world was great. And there was no plans, no strategy, no effort to be able to resolve any of these problems. So when I sit here with confidence to tell you I believe that we're going to solve the problem in crime, it's because I know that we're putting the resources and we're getting the cooperation of people. When I say to you that we're going to have a world-class education system, because I see the effort that's going in, I see how hard people are working. When I want to have a world-class healthcare system, I see the effort. And let me say this to you, Tim. People talk about change. Real change only comes when there's pain. Honestly, if in fact you are not changing, then life is comfortable. If you're changing, then people are going to be feeling that pain. And we've gone through the pain for the last 3 years. We're now starting to see more people gain confidence in what the government is doing. There's no better example than the horse racing. Look at how much controversy the horse racing and DSH has caused from day one. From day one. And now, when you go to view for it, the sentiment is starting to change. The sentiment's starting to change nationally, and I can tell you what I saw on Sunday last week for the dress rehearsal. Solutions are going to be blown away. Does it mean that horse racing is the priority of my government? No. But horse racing and that event is going to bring international recognition to St. Lucia, is going to contribute significantly to the economy and the confidence that people have in St. Lucia. It's going to differentiate St. Lucia automatically from everybody else in the world. And we were prepared to go through that pain to be able to introduce a new idea. I'm glad to see many people who were on the other side, who were criticizing the project, now coming on to support the project. And I know come Friday that everybody is going to be convinced that we're heading in the right direction.
Final comments from you, Mr. Prime Minister?
I think it's important for me to say, first of all, Merry Christmas to everybody in St. Lucia. I want to thank, first of all, my cabinet colleagues, my parliamentarian colleagues, the civil servants, the police officers, the nurses, the teachers, all for their incredible efforts that they've been given to my government and the support they've been given to my government. I want to particularly thank my constituents in Micoud South, in Dugan, Lacouville, in T-Rocher, in Deriso, in Blasha, in Chic, Angers, to just say thank you for your incredible support. And I'm very excited about the projects that are coming to the constituency in 2020. More importantly, I want to say to Solutions that I think 2020 is going to be an amazing year for us. I think that the 40th anniversary was a year to remember. I'm so grateful to all the people that contributed to what we were doing for our 40th anniversary and all the artists and the successes that we've had. If there's one person I have to say that has really impressed me, and there have been a lot of solutions that have really stood out in 2019, I have to say to is Miss Alfred. This is a young lady who I got to meet just after she won her gold medal at the Commonwealth Games. And when I met her, the humility that she had, the humbleness that she had, the focus that she had. You know, she left here to go to Jamaica in order to really hone her skills. And she went to Texas Austin. She was injured even though she was having a good season in her freshman season. She's come out with a record time in the 60 meters. We have Olympics coming in 2020. And both her and Laverne, I think that we have high hopes for both of them. So I just want to say to all those Solutions who are remaining positive, who love their country, continue to criticize us because that's part of it, but the criticism is about making us better, not to tear down our country. So I just want to thank all of you who continue to give me your prayers. When you see me in the street and you hug me, I cannot begin to tell you how much that means to me, and that my government and particularly myself remained incredibly focused of the promise that we made to the electorate to build a new St. Lucia for all solutions.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for being my guest on this evening's NewsMaker Live. And to you, the viewers, thank you so much for watching the broadcast, and thank you so much for contributing. That's our last NewsMaker Live for 2019. So I'd like to wish you and your family a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you so much for tolerating me over the last year. And here's hoping that you'll continue to watch the program when we return, God willing, in 2020. My name is Timothy Paulion saying good night and see you next time.